what's up everyone? So today let's talk some fucking business. You know what's crazy is that the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 events that I've done, the number one question I've gotten is, it's mostly younger people too, which is awesome. It's mostly the younger generation. I would say the 15 through 24 year olds. The question has been, Rich, I'm looking, for my future. I'm looking to make money. I'm looking for what kind of business to go into. What's the best direction for me to go? And that's the question I get the most. And it's from the younger generation, which is awesome that they're thinking that way, because when I was that age, I wasn't thinking that way. My mind didn't start working as far as me worrying about my future or, what I was going to do for the rest of my life. I didn't start thinking like that till I was about 22, 23 is when it really kicked in, and I really started, focusing on my future and, making money and trying to get ahead while I was still competing in bodybuilding, which is almost, a no-win situation. So it's hard to get ahead when you're competing in bodybuilding contests. Everyone knows that. But that's when I started focusing. So it's great to see the younger generation focusing on that stuff at such an early age. I mean, 15, 16-year-olds talking to me about this stuff, which is unbelievable. And, it's mostly the internet, being able to watch videos and listen and learn things you don't learn in school, which there's so many things that they need to teach in school that they don't. But let's get down to business. So I've talked in the past, about stock market. I've talked about real estate. I've talked about opening your own business. I've talked about different things. And so let's talk about the stock market. Stock market, you're going to need money to make money. Okay. Most of the people inquiring, my advice, and again, I'm not a fucking expert at this. I don't claim to be an expert. I'm not an expert. I can just tell you what I know from my experiences, and that's about it. So don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to act like I'm a teacher in any way, shape, or form. Just people fucking ask, so I'm gonna fucking answer. You guys tell me what you want to hear, I'll fucking tell you. I'll tell you the exact fucking truth. Stock market, you need money to make money. So I don't think this category applies to most of the people out there watching my videos. And I had a younger gentleman tell me that he had $10,000 saved up, and he was wondering if that was enough money to get into day trading. And it is, but when I told him the possible amount of monthly income he can expect to make doing it safely, he wasn't that enthused, with the amount of income he was gonna be making, considering he was gonna put $10,000, into a firm to trade with. So I think most people are not gonna choose that route as far as, the stock market, as far as long-term investing, short-term day trading. You really need to have quite a bit of money in your account to make decent money, at least money enough to live off of and save and get ahead. I would say you're going to need at least $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 in a brokerage account in order, to safely day trade low risk blue chip stocks and, make a considerable amount of money per month. So I would say that's probably out for most people. As far as real estate, same thing, you need money to make money. Or you need a house that's currently yours, you can pull the equity out, but if you don't have money, you don't have money saved for down payment, real estate really isn't going to work. And, you see these, get rich quick schemes with real estate and stuff. And, I think you all know that if it's too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. So don't go that route. So where are we left? We're left with opening a business. Now, I would say, there was a time when the internet, was going crazy. And when it came to stock market, the market was out of control. Everyone was making fucking so much money. And there was a time when the real estate market was on its way up, and everyone was making so much money, and it was crazy. And, that time is gone and past. And I don't see that happening any time in the near future. The market, the real estate market, stock market, it's not going to do that. So, as far as, what happened back whenever it was 12, maybe 12, 15 years ago, it's not going to happen again, at least not for a while. So, but as far as opening your own business, now is a million times easier than it was back 12, 15 years ago. It's a million times simpler with social media at our fingertips. To have a successful business, it's so simple. I mean, it's amazingly easy to have a successful business, and that would definitely be the road to go for anyone out there who's looking, to get ahead, at their future as far as, making money and being successful. I would say opening your own business, and when I say your own business, I'm talking, internet-based business, not a storefront. It's low overhead, it's not a very big investment, and you can market the fuck out of it on social media. Now, if you don't have social media following, which is a lot of people out there, you have to understand that other people out there do. So, you can use other people's social media to benefit your business. And, you might have friends, you might have family, you might have cousins, you might have someone who has a decent, social media platform, and they might help you advertise your business on their social media, or you can always pay people to help you advertise on their social media, which, the amount of money you pay for what you get in return, it's a no-brainer. Someone out there who has typically 200,000 followers, you could pay them maybe $300, I would say, as average, for them to post something advertising your business for a day, and you figure 200,000 people are going to see that post. How much business is that going to bring to your business? Well, depending on who's posting it, what their followers are into. If it's something to do with the fitness industry, and the person that has 200,000 followers is, big in the fitness industry, then obviously most of their followers are involved in the fitness industry, and your product is something that they could use or might possibly want to purchase, or need. So the chances and the business you can get from that one post is huge. You could sell thousands, of items off that one post for $300. So you figure out, your profit margin, what you're making, as opposed to what you're investing in the marketing, and it's really next to nothing. You have to have a website. Nowadays you can build your own website. It's pretty simple. I can't, but most of you out there can. Coming up with a product. I guess that's the difficult part, is coming up with a product that is different, that possibly hasn't been done, that you think is something people definitely need or would want in their lives. And that's the tricky part. But it's crazy because there's so many things out there that haven't been done. There's so many things out there, things pop in my head on a daily basis. I'm just so busy with the stuff I'm working on that I just can't run here and run there and, start all these new projects. But things pop in my head daily, and I'm sure if you guys open your minds and, think in that direction 24/7, things will pop in your head and you'll come up with ideas. And, for me, it's not so much coming up with ideas, it's me picking out which idea I think is the best to move forward with. Ideas pop in my head all the time. So let's say you have 20 ideas, you sitting there working out which idea is the best to move forward with. That's the hard part for me. There's so many possibilities out there. And, once you find that product, that idea, you simply build a website, take pictures of the product and start marketing it, and, how you market it is very important. Who you market it to, and, you sit and figure out the numbers, and the investment is so small and the rewards can be so huge. And, I've had 3 clothing businesses in my day, and I made money on all 3. And the reason the first two didn't continue being successful was they grew too fast and I didn't have the means to keep them going. So it's something that needs to be thought about ahead of time is, if you're gonna start a clothing line, let's say, you don't need to come out with 8 products, 8 different, items of clothing. You come out with 1 or 2, market the shit out of them, and then as a business grows, you add more items. I had a clothing line that probably had about 8 different items, and what happened is I got my clothes in 9 different stores, and they sold really well. And when it was time for me, to bring them new clothes, they weren't made yet because I didn't have the funds. And then what happened is my clothes were winter style clothes, and summer, was around the corner. And when they asked for my summer line, I didn't have a summer line. So they basically took my winter line out and I had nothing. And that was it. And at the time I didn't even think summer line, winter line. I was just fucking selling clothes. I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. But when you get the clothes in stores, there's certain way things work, and you have to know all these details and so forth. So that clothing business obviously could have been very successful. I just didn't have the means to keep it going. I was clueless. I didn't know what I was doing, but I had a very, very good product, obviously, because it sold right away, and I couldn't keep up with the demand. And then, they asked for my summer line, and I didn't have a summer line, so that was pretty much it. I couldn't, go and have a summer line made in a couple days. It doesn't work that way. I was doing all my stuff in downtown LA, and I was having all my stuff custom made. So it was a lot of work, what I was doing. That clothing line, by the way, was called Bobel. And, some people might even, older people out there might remember, but Bobel is basically French, and Beau is handsome for a man, and Belle is beautiful for a woman. And, they're basically clothes that were designed for, people that look good, and these clothes actually made you look better. The way the clothes fit, they accentuated the body. And, this was back probably 18 years ago, back when the bodybuilders were wearing tights, and, we were wearing, little string tank tops, and, it was a different time then. We dressed, nowadays it'd be made fun of, but it's kind of come back a little bit. But, the late 80s, early 90s was, a nightmare for bodybuilders. We dressed like clowns. But the clothes were up that alley as far as making, your body look a lot better than it really is. And I took a lot of time in developing the patterns and so forth. And anyone that tried the clothes on were sold, if that's what you were into. But anyway, my second clothing line was called Inflict Pain, and I brought that out right when the UFC first came out. I came out with that clothing line before Tap Out came out with theirs, believe it or not. And it was basically ego-driven clothes, to do with fighting and so forth, alter ego, and some good shit. And people out there that were in the chat rooms back in the day probably remember, but I sold a shitload of it, through the chat rooms, back in that time, and it became popular, and I just, again, couldn't keep up with the demand. I just didn't have the means necessary. And what happened is I didn't do it to turn into a clothing line. I did it for fun, because I was into fighting and into MMA back then, and there were no clothes that had to do with that until Tap Out came out. So I was, doing MMA, and I was watching it, right after the first UFC. So I came out with this little line for, the people that in the class with me and at the gym, and someone saw a picture of me posted on the chat room. They asked about it. I put the information up. Next thing you know, people started wanting to order it. So I created a website, and it kind of turned into an accidental business. And I just couldn't keep up with the demand because it wasn't something I had planned on, doing at the time. But anyway, I'm kind of going off a tangent talking about my businesses, which hopefully can help people when they're thinking about what they're going to do, so they don't make the same mistakes I made. But that's my advice to everyone out there that's looking, you know, to start their own business or do their own thing and get out of the whole 9 to 5 working for someone else, making someone else money. You know, the whole goal is, you know, you want to be working, you know, to make yourself money, not working your ass off to make someone, you know, to make someone else money, right? So people out there that want to get out of that 9 to 5 job, I would suggest looking into, you know, opening up, you know, coming out with a product and, you know, opening a business and selling that product and marketing it through social media. And, you know, there's so many, here's a real quick example is, you know, someone, you know, a company recently came out with, you know, putting the scooper of the protein powder, you know, on top of the bottle, right? So you open up the lid, there's a scooper. Well, how many years did it take us dumb fucks, including myself, to stir around the fucking protein powder looking for the fucking scooper, getting your hand all fucking dusty and spilling powder all over the floor and making a fucking mess? How many years did we do that before someone said, hey, I got an idea, why don't we put the scooper on top? Yeah, that's you know, it's just stupid shit like that where, you know, there's so many fucking ideas that are right in front of our fucking face that we don't fucking see. Now, I was told that this company actually trademarked this, and no other company can do this unless they get permission by them. I don't know if that's true. But if it is, you know, obviously there you go. There's a fucking idea right there. You know, someone fucking was digging for the protein powder and said, hey, I got an idea. Why don't I put a fucking scooper on top, trademark that shit. Every company wants to do that. They got to pay me, you know, this much money, and there you go. There's your answer, right? It's pretty simple. There's shit like that all over the place. Every day in our daily life, we miss little things like that that are money-making ideas, you know. And if we open our eyes and we really pay attention to what the fuck is going on in life, you know, we can come up with these simple ideas to make money. You know, it's just our mind has to be geared towards that. You know, your mind has to be geared towards making money, you know, being successful. And, you know, the people out there that are geared towards bodybuilding, you're not missing meals, you're not missing workouts, you're not missing, you know, whatever, supplements, because your mind's geared that way. So you just gotta have your mind geared in the way of making money, getting ahead, being successful. And if your mind's always thinking that way, these ideas are gonna jump out at you, and you're gonna be having ideas pop in your head, and the right idea will come along, and you jump on it, and there you go, you know. And it's a lot easier than people realize. You know, you just have to be fucking working on it 24/7. You know, thinking about it, brainstorming, you know, coming up with ideas, coming up with different products, and also, you know, thinking about the marketing aspect, you know, going on social media, figuring out social media, you know, coming up with new ways that you can use, you know, to market your product. You know, maybe you can hold contests, you know, where this, that, you know, I'm just throwing things out at you that you go and you just brainstorm and you can come up with ideas that no one else has even come up with. You know, marketing ideas on social media that people haven't even thought of. You know, it's up to you. You know, but you just have to have that mindset, and you have to focus and you know, really think about this shit, and really just, you know, concentrate, and just, you know, for hours and hours and hours, and shit will pop in your head. And people have been asking me to do a video on day trading, do a video on real estate, and I don't think it's going to be that helpful, because, you know, you're going to have somewhat of a portfolio. You know, you're going to have money to start a portfolio, and I don't think a lot of people out there have, you know, that much cash to actually make money in day trading or, you know, real estate, buying real estate. So I think the business, you know, the business idea is the best. And, you know, to sit here and from A to Z, you know, come up with an idea, right? Once you have the idea, you know, think about how to market it. Think about what audience, you know, what's the best way to market it, what's spending the least amount of money. You know, another thing is, people out there that don't have an idea, you can start working on your social media now. You can start coming up with ideas with social media on how to market shit, you know, as, you know, you're trying to find, you know, an idea of what you can sell, you know, or what you can promote. But anyway, guys, that's my 2 cents on business. And if there was any direction I would point you in, it would be starting your own business and coming up with your own product, and marketing on social media, starting a website, and starting that business out of your home. People order shit, and you fill the orders, take them to the post office, send them out, and before you know it, you're hiring employees to work in your home to fill the orders. Next thing you know, you have an office. Next thing you know, you have a warehouse. Next thing you know, you have a full-on fucking business, and you're fucking killing it. And that's where all these businesses start. All these top businesses that you hear of, Microsoft, fucking Ben and Jerry's, like all these businesses, they started in a motherfucking garage, with two fucking young, eager fucking kids, wanting to be successful, and they had an idea, and right now, if you told me your idea was fucking ice cream, I'd say I think you can probably come up with a better idea than that. But hey, when it came to Ben and Jerry's, that was their fucking idea, and look where they are now. I don't know if you guys know the story behind that, but anyway, it's a pretty interesting story. Same with Microsoft, starting in a fucking garage. Facebook. I mean, all these businesses, they all started somewhere, and they started on a small scale, and they've been built up to, multi-million, billion-dollar businesses. So that could be you. So start thinking, use your brain, and focus, and keep your head in that direction. And next time you're scrolling on Instagram, wasting your fucking day, remember what Rich Piana told you. Fucking stop wasting your fucking time. Social media should be used for business, man, not for fucking personal. Your life should be fucking interesting enough that you don't give a fuck what other people are doing in their life. So if your life is that uninteresting to where you're caught up in other people's lives, then you need to make some changes, man, and make your fucking life interesting as fuck, to where you don't even care what the fuck other people are doing, because your life is fun, filled with some fucking, awesome ass shit, to where you don't give a fuck what other people are doing. So that's your goal. So don't let me fucking see you wasting your time on Instagram scrolling through the news feed, or better yet, Facebook, scrolling through the news feed. Put your fucking brain to use, put your time to use, and you only have 24 hours in a day. Make it fucking useful, make it worthwhile, and put your brain to work and come up with some shit. And and there's enough money in this world for all of us. So fucking let's get that fucking money.